The screen would not stop counting, and Warden HFY War had already lost the number twice. 40,001, 40,004. The tally climbed at the edge of her command lens as the last of the Concorde wings folded out of jump space and took station above the dead moon of Kellis. She did not need the count to know what it meant. She could feel it in the deck under her feet, in the low hum of 40,000 reactors holding formation in a single volume of space. No fleet that large had ever gathered in one place in the long memory of the Veth. It was not a fleet anymore. It was a wall. And against the wall, alone, sat one ship. "Read it again," she said. The sensor officer, a young Veth named Drell, did not answer at once. His 3 eyes were fixed on his own panel, and his throat sacs had gone pale. "Warden, I have read it 9 times. The result does not change." "Then it will be 10. He read it. 1 contact, human registry. Length, 2,100 meters. No transponder. No origin code. No match in any Concorde archive across 11,000 years of records." He swallowed. "It is not a warship by our classes. It is not a freighter. It does not fit any shape we have a word for." HFY War leaned toward the great window of her flagship, the Concorde dreadnought Imperant Crown, and looked with her own eyes at the thing they had cornered. 2,000 meters of dark hull hung in the black above the moon, lit only by the cold blue light of its own running lamps. It was long and low and ugly, a slab of gray metal with no grace to it at all, scarred across its flanks by old burns that no one had bothered to paint over. It did not move. It did not signal. It simply hung there, as if the 40,000 ships around it were a weather it intended to wait out. "It should be terrified," Drell whispered. "It should be dead," HFY War said. "We gave it the order an hour ago. Surrender, or be removed. It has done neither." The order had not been hers to give. That honor belonged to Overlord Kassoon, who watched from the rear of the formation aboard a command platform the size of a small city, and who had spent the last hour making speeches to a vessel that would not even open a channel. The Veth Concorde did not lose worlds. It did not lose battles. It had unified 406 species under one law, and it had done so by arriving in numbers so vast that resistance became a kind of madness. No one fought 40,000 ships. No one even tried. To stand before such a wall was to understand, in the body before the mind caught up, that one's continued existence was a courtesy the Concorde could withdraw at any moment. This one human cruiser had crossed into Concorde space 11 days ago, ignored every warning beacon, refused every demand for identification, and flown a straight line toward the colony cluster at Kellis, as if it owned the road and the stars the road ran between. It had not raised weapons. It had not threatened a single Concorde world. It had simply come, and kept coming, and the Concorde had found that more insulting than any open attack, an attack could be answered. This could only be punished. So the Concorde had assembled the largest single concentration of force in its history, simply to make the point that the road was not, in fact, the humans to own. The point had been made. The human had not listened. "Warden," Drell's voice cracked. "It is powering something." The readouts bloomed across her lens. Along the spine of the gray hull, ports she had taken for hull damage were opening, one after another, in a long, unhurried sequence. Light gathered inside them, deep and red, the color of a forge cooling. There were a great many of them. She tried to count and stopped at 60, and the ports kept opening past 60, calm as breathing. "It is arming," she said, and was surprised by how calm she sounded. Against 40,000 ships? Drell turned to look at her, and for a moment, the discipline left his face entirely. "Warden, that is not defiance. That is suicide. One ship cannot even scratch a wing of ours. It would die before it cleared a quarter of the formation." "Then let it be suicide," she straightened, and made her voice the voice a warden was supposed to have. "All wings, weapons free, forward batteries, target the contact. We have indulged this long enough." The order went out across the wall of ships, and the wall answered. 40,000 vessels turned their guns toward a single point in space. From where she stood, it looked like the whole sky narrowing to a needle, every gun line in the Concorde converging on one gray hull 2,000 meters long, and the hull had not so much as adjusted its heading. It did not flinch from the needle. It seemed, if anything, to be waiting for the Concorde to finish aiming, the way a patient teacher waits for a slow student to finish writing a wrong answer. A channel opened. It was the first signal the human ship had sent in 11 days, and it came not on the diplomatic band, but on every band at once. On the encrypted command frequencies the Concorde guarded with their lives. On the private channel between HFY War and her own bridge, that no vessel outside her hull should have been able to find. It came as a voice, and the voice was a woman's, and it was tired, in a way that frightened her more than any threat could have. It was the tiredness of someone who had done a hard thing many times, and was about to do it once more. Concorde vessels, the voice said, in clean and unhurried Veth. The Concorde's own command dialect, spoken better than most Concorde officers spoke it. This is the cruiser Lantern Hollow of the Terran Deep Patrol. You have surrounded a single ship and called it a victory. I want you to remember that you did this. I want you to remember that you had the choice to let one ship pass, and you chose 40,000 guns instead. Whatever you tell yourselves afterward, remember that the choice was yours, and you made it freely, with every advantage of numbers, and no one made you. Overlord Kassoon's voice cut across the channel, furious that the human had reached frequencies he believed were sealed. You are one vessel. You will lower your weapons and submit to boarding, or you will cease to exist. There is no third path. There has never been a third path for anyone who stood against the Concorde, and there will be none for you. There is always a third path, the woman said. You simply assumed we would never take it. That has been the Concorde's mistake for 11,000 years. You confuse the paths you can imagine with the paths that exist. HFY War felt the cold climb her spine, vertebra by vertebra. Identify your captain, she said, because it was the only question she could think of that might buy her a moment to understand the dread now filling her bridge. A pause. Commander Iris Vale, the voice answered, and I am not the thing you should be worried about. The red ports along the human hull reached full brightness, and the light of them washed across the dead moon and turned its gray craters the color of an old wound. Drell made a sound she had never heard a Veth make, low and broken, the sound of a mind refusing the thing its instruments were telling it. Warden, he said, the contact is not 2,000 meters. She turned. What? The hull we have been scanning is the bow. His claws moved over the panel, slow, as if he did not want to finish, as if finishing would make it true. There is more behind it. Our sensors could not see it, because it was running cold. Colder than the void, colder than anything we have a setting for. It is unfolding, Warden. The 2,000 meters is the bow alone. The rest was hidden in the moon's shadow the entire time. The number on her lens, the one that had counted 40,000 Concorde ships, was now joined by a second number, and the second number was the length of the human vessel, and it was climbing, and it climbed the way the first number had climbed, except that the first number had been their strength, and this one was their error. 2,000, 4,000, 6,000. Stop the count, she said. I cannot. It is still extending. The sensors are doing it on their own. They do not believe it either. 8,000, 11,000, 14. The gray hull they had cornered, the single ugly slab they had brought 40,000 ships to humble, was opening behind the bow like something waking from a long sleep, section after section of dark armor unfolding out of the moon's shadow where it had hidden the whole time. It had not blundered into the wall. It had backed itself against the dark side of Kellis with deliberate care, so the Concorde would see only the smallest part of it, would aim at only the smallest part of it, would believe it had cornered a cruiser when it had in fact been standing in the open mouth of something it had no name for. The number stopped at 19,400 meters. The Lantern Hollow was 19 kilometers long, and the Concorde had aimed every gun it owned at the first 1/10 of it, and called that first tenth the whole, and called the surrounding of it a victory. Overlord, HFY War said into the command channel, and now her voice was not calm at all. We need to withdraw the forward wings. We need to withdraw them now, before it finishes powering those ports. Whatever it is, we are inside its reach, and it is not inside ours. There was no answer from the command platform. There was only the woman's voice, Commander Iris Vale, returning to every channel at once, quiet and even and final. The voice of someone who had given the wall every chance and was finished giving them. You wanted to see the whole ship, she said. Look up. And 40,000 Concorde crews looked up, away from the bow they had been told was the enemy, and saw what had been hanging over them in the dark the entire time. 19 kilometers of human warship filling the sky above their formation, like a second moon that had come alive. And the wall of ships that had never lost a battle in 11,000 years began, for the first time in its history, to break formation on its own, without an order, the way a thing breaks when its mind finally catches up to its body. HFY War did not run. There was nowhere to run to. The human ship was already above and around and ahead of them. She stood at the great window of the imperant crown and watched the red light of 19 kilometers of human warship pour into the open ports, and she understood, far too late, the exact shape of the mistake the Concorde had made. They had counted their ships. They had counted them with such pride. They had never once counted the dark. The first volley came from the Concorde, not the human, and that was the detail HFY War would carry with her afterward, if there was an afterward to carry anything into. Overlord Kassoon gave the order in a voice that had lost its certainty but not its pride. 40,000 ships had been arranged to make a point, and Kassoon would rather see them all burn than admit the point had been wrong. So the wall fired. Every forward battery in the Concorde let go at once, a sheet of light so dense that for a heartbeat the dead moon of Kellis was lit as bright as day. Every crater thrown into hard relief, and then the relief was gone, because the light kept coming, and the eye could no longer find shadow anywhere. 10 million weapons converged on a single 19-kilometer hull. HFY War watched the storm reach the Lantern Hollow and break against it. It did not break the way she expected. There was no flash of a shield bubble flaring and failing, no slow grinding down of defenses under weight of fire, no proud last stand of a ship absorbing more than it could bear. The light simply arrived at the human hull and stopped, as if the space a meter from the armor had been told it could come no closer, and had obeyed. A faint shimmer ran along the length of the gray ship, blue and even, and where the Concorde guns hammered hardest, the shimmer grew brighter and stayed exactly where it was. 19 kilometers of warship took the combined fire of the largest fleet in Concorde history and held its heading and did not even adjust its lamps. "Damage to the contact?" Kassoon demanded. The reply came from 100 sensor officers across 100 bridges, and they all said the same thing in the same shaking voices. "None, Overlord. That is impossible. Recalibrate your instruments. Every one of you. Fire again." They fired again. The wall poured everything into the human ship a second time, and a third, until the void between the formation and the Lantern Hollow was a solid bar of light, and the reactors of 40,000 vessels strained at their limits. HFY War felt the imperant crown shudder under the load of its own weapons. She had never asked a hull to give so much for so long. She had served the Concorde for 60 years. She had seen worlds bow. She had watched proud species kneel, rather than face the wall. She had never seen a fleet pour out its full strength and accomplish nothing at all, and the nothing was worse than any defeat, because a defeat, at least, admits the contest was real. When the third volley faded, the Lantern Hollow was still there, unmarked, patient, and the red ports along its spine were still filling, still calm, as if the 3 volleys had been a question it had not yet bothered to answer. "Drell," she said quietly, "how long until it returns fire?" He did not look up. "I do not think it is in a hurry, Warden. I think it is waiting for us to be certain." That was the thing about it. The human ship had every advantage and used none of them quickly. It let the Concorde empty itself first. It let them see, with their own instruments, that nothing they had could touch it, and it let them see it 3 times, so that no crew could later pretend the first reading had been an error. A warship in a panic would have struck the moment its enemy paused for breath. The Lantern Hollow simply waited, and the waiting was a weapon of its own. Because every second it waited, the Concorde crews understood a little better what they were facing, and understanding, HFY War was learning, was the cruelest weapon of all. The channel opened again. Iris Vale. "You have fired 3 full volleys," she said. "I let you. I wanted you to be certain. I wanted there to be no story you could tell yourselves afterward where this was bad luck, or a flaw in your aim, or a single weapon that failed at the wrong moment. You brought everything you have. You used it 3 times. Now look at my hull. I will wait while you look." HFY War looked at the hull. There was not a scratch on it. The old burns along its flanks, the scars no one had painted over, were exactly as they had been when it first hung above the moon. Whatever had made those scars, it had not been the Concorde, and the Concorde could not even add to them. "Now," Iris Vale said, "I am going to show you why we asked you to let one ship pass." The red ports fired. Not all at once. That was the cruelty of it, though Seth of War did not think the humans meant it as cruelty. They meant it as arithmetic. The lantern hollow opened with 60 beams from its forward spine, and each beam was a column of red light 100 meters across, and each beam found a Concorde ship and did not stop at it. The first beam struck a Concorde battlecruiser, a vessel that crewed 900 Veth, and passed through it as if the cruiser were fog, and continued on, and struck the ship behind it, and the ship behind that, until a single beam had bored a line clean through 11 vessels, and out into the dark beyond the formation, and the 11 vessels did not explode so much as simply stop being, the way a word stops when you close your mouth. 60 beams, 11 ships each. Seth of War's lens did the count for her before she could stop it. 660 Concorde vessels gone in the time it took to draw a breath, and the lantern hollow had used, by Drell's reading, 4% of its available power. 4%. She made herself remember the number. 660 ships for 4%. "Withdraw," Seth of War said. "All wings under my command. Withdraw to the secondary line. Now, before it fires again." "Belay that." Kassoon's voice, raw with fury. The fury of a thing that has never been told no. No Concorde vessel retreats. No Concorde vessel has ever retreated. We outnumber it 66,000 to 1 in firepower. We will overwhelm it by mass. Press the attack. Press it until it cannot recharge. Overlord, 66,000 to 1 means nothing if its 1 cannot be touched, and our 66,000 cannot survive being touched. We are not overwhelming it, we are feeding it. You will press the attack, Warden, or I will find a Warden who will. Across the formation, a few of the wing commanders tried, in the last moments of their certainty, to do what 40 centuries of doctrine demanded. The second line concentrated its fire on a single point of the human hull, the theory being that no defense could hold forever against a focused beam, that even an unbreakable wall would crack if every hammer fell on the same stone. 3,000 ships poured their entire output into 1 square kilometer of gray armor, and the blue shimmer over that square kilometer grew so bright that Seth of War's lens dimmed itself to save her sight. And when the dimming lifted, the armor beneath was exactly as it had been, unscarred, unbothered, the old burns still showing through. The doctrine that had conquered 406 species had finally met a wall it could not crack, and the wall was not even the whole ship. It was 1 square kilometer of a hull, 19 kilometers long. Another commander tried to ram. It was the oldest answer of a fleet that had run out of newer ones, the choice of a captain who would rather strike the impossible thing with his own hull than watch it kill him from a distance. He drove his battlecruiser at full burn toward the Lantern Hollow's flank, 900 Veth aboard, and the human ship did not so much as turn aside. The battlecruiser struck the blue shimmer and stopped, simply stopped, as if it had run into the side of a world, and crumpled along its own length, and slid away in pieces, and the Lantern Hollow's lamps did not flicker, and the human commander did not even remark on it. It was beneath remark. That was the thing the Concorde could not bear, worse than the dying, that the dying was beneath remark. She closed the command channel. For 3 seconds she stood in silence on her own bridge, and her crew watched her, every one of them, and she made the only choice that the arithmetic allowed. "Forward wings," she said on her private band, the one Kassoon could not override fast enough. "Disperse, break formation. Do not present yourselves in a line. Scatter and run, and keep running, and do not reform on anyone's order, including mine." Some of them obeyed. Many did not, because Kassoon's order had come first, and the habit of 40 centuries was strong, and a Veth who had spent a lifetime being told that the wall always wins, did not easily believe his own eyes. The ones who scattered lived a little longer. The ones who held formation gave the Lantern Hollow exactly what it was built to use. The human ship began to move. It did not charge. It advanced into the formation at a slow, deliberate pace. 19 kilometers of gray hull sliding forward through a sky full of enemies, and as it came it fired. And the firing was methodical, almost gentle. the way a worker clears a field of stones he has cleared 100 times before. The red beams swept in long arcs, and where they swept, the Concord wall came apart in clean, straight cuts. There was no rage in it. HFY War had braced herself for rage, for the wild overkill of a cornered animal lashing out. What the Lantern Hollow gave instead was worse. It was the calm of something that had done this before, that knew exactly how much force the task required, and that found the task small, beneath its attention, a chore rather than a battle. Drell was reciting numbers now in a flat, dead voice, the way the young recite when the alternative is to break. 2,000 lost, 3,000. The fourth wing is gone, Warden. The whole fourth wing. It crossed their station in a single pass and did not slow down. Tell the third wing to clear that volume. The third wing is in that volume. She looked at the plot. He was right. The Lantern Hollow had positioned itself so that the densest part of the Concord formation, the part Kassoon had masked to seem most fearsome to the human, was now the part with nowhere to go. The human commander had read the wall and found its single weakness, which was that a wall cannot move. 40,000 ships in tight formation made a magnificent threat and a magnificent target. And the threat and the target were the same thing. And the humans had simply waited until the threat was complete, before pointing out that the two had been identical all along. Drell flinched at his panel. Warden, the human ship is broadcasting again, but not to us. It is broadcasting outward, away from the formation, on the open long-range bands the whole Concord can receive. Saying what? Coordinates, Drell said. Ours, the position of every wing, the name of every flagship, the order the Overlord gave, word for word. He looked up, and there was a new horror in his 3 eyes, the horror of a thing understanding that its shame would outlive it. It is not just killing us, Warden. It is publishing us. It is making sure that everyone who was not here will know exactly what was here, and exactly what it took to undo it, and exactly who gave the order that made it necessary. HFY War understood then that the demonstration had never been for the 40,000 alone. The 40,000 were only the proof. The audience was everyone else. Channel from the contact, Drell said. It is for you, Warden. By name. On your private band again. She accepted it. Vale. Warden HFY War. The human commander knew her name. Of course she did. The humans had been listening for 11 days while the Concord shouted threats across open channels, naming themselves, naming their ranks, naming everything. You broke your wings and ran them against the Overlord's order. That was the right call. I want you to know, I see who made it, and I want you to know that it is the reason your ship is not yet a line of holes in the dark. You are killing my fleet. Your fleet came here to kill a single ship that asked for nothing but to pass. I gave your Overlord an hour. I gave him 3 volleys. I gave him the chance to count my hull and reconsider while he still could. A pause, and the tiredness in the voice deepened, became something almost like grief. He told me to cease to exist, so I am teaching your Concord that the word exist does not belong to him. It never did. It belongs to whatever can enforce it. For 406 species, that was your numbers. For 11,000 years, no one could enforce existence against your numbers, so you forgot that the numbers were ever the reason, and you began to believe you simply deserved to be the ones who decided. And then we built a ship that could enforce it against you, and the deserving turned out to be exactly as real as it always was, which is to say not at all. One ship, HFY War said. One ship, Iris Vale agreed. We held the rest back. I want you to understand that too, Warden, before this is over, because it is the part your Overlord will never let himself understand. The Lantern Hollow is not the fleet. The Lantern Hollow is the patrol. We sent the smallest thing we had that could do the job, because we wanted you to know the size of the thing you would have to face if you ever made us send the rest. We are not showing you our strength. We are showing you the smallest corner of it, and even the corner is more than your 11,000 years can hold. The channel closed. HFY War stood very still. Around her, the bridge crew of the Imperant Crown waited for an order, and she had none to give that would change anything. The plot showed the Concord formation collapsing inward, ship after ship winking out as the gray hull moved through them, and she understood at last that she was not watching a battle. A battle has 2 sides, and stakes, and a moment where it could go either way. This was a demonstration, and the audience was every species the Concord had ever made kneel. and the lesson was being recorded by 10,000 survivors, so that it could not be denied. "Drell," she said, "open a record, a true one, not for the Overlord, for whoever comes after him." He hesitated, then obeyed. The young ones always obeyed her in the end. It was Kassoon they had stopped believing in somewhere in the last hour, watching 40,000 guns do nothing at all. "Begin," she said, and spoke for the record, slowly, so that every word would survive. "This is Warden Seth of War, of the Concord Dreadnought Imperant Crown. At the 11th hour of the standoff at Kellis, the human vessel Lantern Hollow revealed its true length at 19 kilometers and absorbed 3 full Concord volleys without damage. It then returned fire and is, as I speak, dismantling the largest fleet the Concord has ever assembled, using by its own account 4% of its power. I record this so that the Concord cannot later claim the ship was a trick, or a weapon of forgotten gods, or a story told by cowards to excuse a defeat. It is a ship. It was built by hands. The humans we called primitive built it, and they built only enough of it to teach us a lesson, and they held the rest back so that we would lie awake for generations wondering how much more there is." She paused. The Lantern Hollow had reached the heart of the formation. The command platform where Kassoon watched, the city-sized vessel that had given the order to make a single human cease to exist, lay directly in the human ship's path, and the human ship had not altered course by a single degree to reach it. It had simply continued straight ahead, and straight ahead happened to be the throne. "Mark the time," she said. "The Overlord is about to learn the third path." Kassoon's voice flooded the channel one last time, no longer furious. The pride finally cracked all the way through to the frightened thing beneath it. "Lantern Hollow. This is Overlord Kassoon of the Veth Concord. I am authorized to negotiate. I am authorized to offer terms, any terms. The colony at Kellis is yours. The road is yours. Any road you wish to travel is yours, forever. I withdraw the order. Do you hear me? I withdraw the order to cease to exist. It was given in error. I withdraw it." The human commander's voice came back, and it was not unkind, which was the worst part of all, because unkindness she could have understood. "You cannot withdraw it," Iris Vale said. "You only got to give it once. That was the whole point of 40,000 ships, Overlord. You arranged the sky so that there would be no third path for me, no negotiation, no terms, only obey or end. You taught me, very carefully, with 40,000 guns, that for the one who is surrounded, there is no third path. So now I am simply giving you back the lesson you taught. There is no third path for you either. You drew the rule. I am only keeping it." The Lantern Hollow did not slow as it reached the command platform. It did not even seem to notice it. A single beam, one of the smaller ones, swept across the city-sized vessel, and the vessel was simply no longer there, and the human ship continued on through the space where the Concord's pride had been, and out the far side, into the open dark. And Kassoon's channel did not so much go silent as cease, mid-word, the way the 11 cruisers had ceased. Drell was no longer reciting numbers. There were too many now, and they were too large, and somewhere in the last minute the count had stopped meaning anything. 10,000 ships remained, and the rate did not slow, and somewhere in the dwindling Seth of War stopped thinking of them as ships at all, and began thinking of them as a number being corrected, a wrong sum being patiently reduced toward its true value by a teacher who had all night. 20,000 ships remained, then 15, then 10. The wall that had never lost a battle in 11,000 years was coming apart around a single gray hull that had not yet used a tenth of what it carried, and the hull was in no hurry to finish, because finishing was not the point. The point was that everyone watching would never forget. "Warden," Drell said, "what do we do? There is no order left to give. The Overlord is gone." Seth of War looked at the human ship, moving through the ruin of the Concord with the patience of something that had all the time in the world and knew it, and she made the decision that would let her crew see another sunrise, the decision Kassoon had forbidden with his last breath, the decision Iris Vale had been begging the Concord to make for 11 days. "We do the one thing the Overlord forbade," she said. "We do the thing the humans wanted someone wise enough to do, 11 days ago, before any of this, before the wall. Warden? We let one ship pass." She gave the order, and the Imperant Crown turned its bow away from the Lantern Hollow and powered down its weapons, every battery going cold, and held position, presenting neither threat nor flight, only stillness, only the posture of a thing that has understood. And she opened a channel to the human ship, the open diplomatic band this time, where the whole of the surviving Concorde could hear, and she said the only words she had left that might mean anything at all. Lantern Hollow, this is the imperant crown. We will not fire on you. We will not pursue. We surrender nothing, because we have nothing left to surrender, that you have not already taken or spared. We only ask to be allowed to record what happened here, and to carry it home, so that no overlord ever again counts ships and calls it certainty. The human commander was quiet for a long moment. The gray hull, 19 kilometers of patient ruin, drifted to a halt 100 kilometers off the imperant crown's bow, and its red ports dimmed, one by one, in the same unhurried sequence in which they had opened, until only its cold blue running lamps remained, and the dead moon of Kellis went back to being gray. Warden Sethivor, Iris Vale said at last, carry it home. Tell them all of it. Tell them we held the rest back. Tell them what one patrol ship did to 40,000. And tell them the next time someone orders a human vessel to cease to exist, we will not bring the patrol. The channel closed. The Lantern Hollow turned, slowly, and began its long way out of Concorde space, exactly the straight line it had come in by. And Sethivor watched it go, and behind it, the dead moon of Kellis was littered with the wreckage of the proudest fleet 406 species had ever built, and she finally understood that the humans had not won by being stronger, though they were stronger. They had won because they had counted something the Concorde never thought to count, and they had been patient enough to let the Concorde count everything else first, and to fire 3 times against an empty hull, and to learn for itself, in its own time, with its own eyes, that the wall had never been a wall at all. The recording reached the Concorde high seat 16 days later, and it did not arrive alone. Sethivor had expected to be the one to carry it home. Instead, the high seat already knew. The Lantern Hollow had not simply let her go. It had let her go on purpose, slow, on a known and predictable route, so that her record would reach the Concorde at the same moment as 11 other records from 11 other survivors who had scattered when she broke her wings. The humans had not silenced the witnesses. They had multiplied them. By the time the imperant crown limped into the high seat's home volume, every species in the Concorde had already seen the dead moon of Kellis from 11 angles, and the number 40,000 had become a wound that would not close. The high seat convened in the great hall above the Concorde homeworld, 406 representatives, in a chamber built across 10,000 years, for the express purpose of reminding every one of them that they were small beside the whole. The architecture itself was an argument. Sethivor stood at the center of it and told the truth, all of it, in the same flat voice she had used for the record, and when she finished, there was no sound in the hall at all, only the soft hum of the chamber's lights, which had been built to feel like the attention of something vast. It was the representative of the Kell who broke the silence, and the Kell had been the last species the Concorde conquered, 3 centuries past, and they had not forgotten how it felt to stand before a wall. You let one ship pass, the Kell said. After it destroyed 40,000 of ours, you powered down your weapons, and you let it go. I let one ship pass, Sethivor said, because the alternative had already been tried by an overlord, who is now a cloud of cooling metal above Kellis. The humans did not ask to pass so they could attack us. They asked to pass. That is all they ever asked. We are the ones who turned a request into a war, and then turned a war into a demonstration, and then forced the demonstration to reach its only possible end. A new voice cut across the chamber, and the chamber flinched, because the voice belonged to High Warden Esh, the most senior military officer in the Concorde, who answered to no one but the seat itself, and who had not spoken in open session in 12 years. The question before us, Esh said, is not whether the warden acted rightly. She did. Any commander in this chamber who claims they would have done otherwise, after watching 3 volleys fail, is lying to the seat and to themselves. The question is, what the humans will do, now that they know we know. They told her they held the rest back. A species that builds a 19-kilometer warship and sends it as a patrol does not build only one. We have, in our arrogance, taught the humans precisely how much force it takes to break us. The honest answer is, very little. And the dangerous truth, the one I want this chamber to sit with, is that they have known it longer than we have. They were not surprised at Kellis. We were. Then we strike first, said the representative of the Moor, whose worlds bordered the human edge, and who had pushed for the Kellis blockade in the first place, and who had the most to answer for. We do not wait for them to send the rest. We gather everything the Concord has, not 40,000 but 4 million, and we end them before they end us. A single ship, however large, cannot stand against the whole. 4 million ships, Esh said softly, is 40,000, 100 times over. We watched what one human vessel did to 40,000. You wish to give it 100 times the targets. You wish to make the demonstration 100 times more total. We cannot simply do nothing. I did not say do nothing. I said, understand the thing in front of you before you decide what to do about it. Esh turned to Seth of War, and the whole chamber turned with him. Warden, you spoke with their commander. You heard her voice for an hour, while the rest of us heard only her guns. Tell the seat what she wanted, not what she did. What she wanted. Seth of War closed her eyes for a moment and heard the tired human voice again, the one that had frightened her more than the beams ever could. She wanted to be remembered correctly, she said. She told me 3 times to carry it home truthfully. She did not want us crushed. She did not want our worlds, our tribute, our kneeling. She wanted us to know, exactly and forever, the size of the mistake we made, and the size of the thing we would face if we made it again. The Lantern Hollow was not sent to conquer. It was sent to correct a misunderstanding. We had misunderstood what humanity was. She fixed that, at the cost of 40,000 of our ships, and she clearly believed the cost was ours, not hers. And if we strike anyway? Then we will have misunderstood it a second time, Seth of War said, and I do not think she will be patient enough to send a patrol. The chamber argued for a long time after that. Seth of War had said her part, and she stepped back into the ring of representatives, and she watched 406 species do what species had always done in the face of a thing too large to grasp. They reached for the comfort of their old certainties. The Moor wanted war, because the alternative was admitting their blockade had begun it. The Kel wanted, quietly, to watch the Concord that had conquered them, learn humility from someone larger still. The smaller species, the ones who had been swept into the Concord without a single shot, because resistance had been madness, wanted only to know which side would let them survive, and were too wise to say so aloud. And the Concord, which had unified a galaxy by being the largest thing in the sky, discovered that it no longer knew how to lead a galaxy that had now seen something larger. It was Drell who brought her the message, 3 days into the argument, his 3 eyes wide and his throat sacs pale again, the way they had been at Kellis when the Count would not stop. Warden, he said, a human vessel has entered the home volume. 1 ship. It is requesting you by name. It passed every defense ring without a single net registering it until it chose to be seen above the seat itself. She went to the window of the high seat's receiving deck, and she looked out at the second ship the humans had sent, and it was not the Lantern Hollow. It was smaller. That was the first thing she understood, and the understanding chilled her more than the unfolding hull had. The Lantern Hollow had been 19 kilometers, and they had called it a patrol. This vessel was perhaps 400 meters, a clean dark wedge with a single line of blue lamps along its prow, and it carried no visible weapons at all, and it had crossed the most heavily defended volume in the entire Concord, past ring after ring of sensors and guns built across 10,000 years, without a single net registering its approach, until it chose to be seen. The Lantern Hollow had taught them that humanity could destroy them. This little ship, by simply being where it was, taught them something worse, that humanity could go wherever it wished, whenever it wished, and they would never know until it was already too late, and that all the walls they had ever built had been a comfort and never a defense. The channel opened. The same tired voice. Iris Vale. Warden Seth of War. I told you I would not bring the patrol next time. I kept that promise. This is the coral step. It is a courier. It carries no weapons at all, not one. I came in it myself, because I wanted to say this to your face, or as close to your face as your kind allows me to come. You crossed our home volume undetected, past every ring, above the seat. Yes. No pride in it. A statement. The way one states the weather. I want you to notice that I could have brought the lantern hollow this way instead, or 10 of them. I want you to notice that the only reason your homeworld is still in the sky tonight is that we chose for it to be, and that the choice was made some time ago, quietly, without your knowledge, the way all the important choices about the Concorde's survival have been made for longer than you would believe. That is the message, Warden. Not the destruction at Kellis. Kellis was the small message, the one for the ones who needed to see fire before they would listen. This is the large one, and it is for the ones who can understand a thing without it burning. We are already past your walls. We have been for a long time. The numbers you trusted were never a wall to us. They were a census. HFY War heard the High Warden Esh come to stand beside her at the window. He had heard all of it. He said nothing, but she saw his understanding arrive, the same understanding that had arrived in her at Kellis, when the count of the human hull would not stop climbing, the cold settling in of a mind accepting a thing it had spent its whole life believing impossible. Your seat is debating whether to strike us first, Iris Vale went on, and of course she knew that too. She was already past their walls, already listening, already counting. I came to make the debate honest. If the Concorde sends 4 million ships toward the human edge will know the day they launch, perhaps the day they decide, and the Lantern Hollow and her sisters will meet them, not at our worlds but at yours, and there will be no recording carried home afterward, because there will be no one left to misunderstand us a third time. That is not a threat, Warden. A threat is a thing the speaker might not do. This is arithmetic. I am only showing you the sum, the way I showed your overlord the 4%. Then what do you want? HFY War said. If not our worlds, if not our surrender, if not our fleets, what does humanity want from the Concorde? Every power that has ever held the upper hand has wanted something. Name yours. The little dark wedge sat in the home volume of 406 species, weaponless and untouchable, above the chamber built to make everyone feel small, and the tired voice answered. We want you to stop counting, Iris Vale said. That is all. Stop building walls of ships and calling them peace. Stop telling small species that resistance is madness, because you can always send more. You unified a galaxy by making everyone feel small, and it worked for 11,000 years because no one could make you feel small back. Now someone can. So the era of feeling small is over for everybody, the Concorde included. You can spend the next 11,000 years afraid of us, jumping at every silence, or you can spend them building something that is not held together by the thread of numbers. We do not care which. We will only intervene if you ever again point 40,000 guns at one ship that asks to pass. Outside of that, the Concorde may do as it likes. We are not your masters. We are only the reason you can no longer be everyone else's. Esh stepped forward then, and HFY War moved aside to let the High Warden speak, because this was no longer hers to answer, and perhaps had never been. Commander Vale, Esh said. I am High Warden Esh. I command what remains of the Concorde's military, which is, I will admit to you plainly, still very large, and now entirely afraid. I have one question, and I would have its true answer, the way the Warden was given true answers. When you say you held the rest back, how much is the rest? There was a long pause. When Iris Vale answered, the tiredness in her voice had a different weight to it, the weight of someone deciding how much truth a frightened thing could survive hearing. High Warden, she said. At Kellis, you saw one patrol cruiser. The Terran Deep Patrol has 900 of them. Behind the Deep Patrol is the Line Fleet, which is built for war and not for patient demonstrations, and which would not have given your overlord an hour, or 3 volleys, or any warning at all. Behind the Line Fleet is the thing we built when we first looked out at a galaxy that had unified 406 species under the threat of numbers, and understood what that galaxy would do to us the moment it noticed we existed. We have been building it since long before you knew our name. We call it the Far Watch, and I will not tell you its size, because the not knowing is the only thing currently keeping your seat from doing something that ends your species. I will tell you only this. The Lantern Hollow was the smallest answer we had to 40,000 ships. The Far Watch is the answer we keep for a question no one has yet been foolish enough to ask. Esh was silent for a long moment. Then, to HFY War's astonishment, the High Warden of the Concorde inclined his head toward the little dark wedge in the window, a gesture the Concorde did not make, had never made, In 11,000 years of being the largest thing in the sky, the gesture a smaller power makes to a greater one. We will not ask it, Esh said. Good, said Iris Vale. Then we understand each other, and the coral step has done its work. It will leave your volume now. You will not be able to track it. Do not waste your sensors trying. It only frightens the crews who watch it fail. Carry this home, the same as Kellis. Tell them all of it, the courier and the question and the answer to the question. And tell them one thing more from me, Warden, that I did not tell you at Kellis because you were not yet ready to hear it. We did not do this because we wanted to be your masters. We did it because we were tired of being afraid of you. 11,000 years your numbers cast a shadow over the human edge, and we lived under it, and built in the dark, and waited. We are simply stepping out of the shadow. What you build in the light is your concern. The dark wedge turned, and its single line of blue lamps swept across the window, and then it was simply gone, not into jump space with a flare the sensors could mark and mourn, but gone the way a held breath is gone, between one instant and the next, leaving the home volume of the Concorde exactly as undefended as it had always secretly been. Seth of War stood at the window beside the High Warden, and the two of them looked out at the empty dark where the courier had been, and neither of them spoke for a long time. You let one ship pass, Esh said at last, at Kellis, and it cost us 40,000. Yes. If you had not let it pass, if you had pursued it after the Overlord fell, if you had done what your training and 40 centuries of habit demanded, then she would not have been patient enough to send a courier, Seth of War said. She would have decided we could not be taught, and she would have sent the Far Watch, and we would not be having this conversation, and neither would anyone else in that chamber, ever again. Esh nodded slowly. He looked older than he had 3 days before, older than the 11,000 years of certainty the Concorde had carried into the standoff at Kellis. 11,000 years, he said. We taught 406 species that the largest force always wins, and in 1 hour, above a dead moon, the humans taught us the correction. The largest force only wins, until something arrives that the largest force cannot count. He turned from the window, toward the chamber, and the argument still raging inside it. Convene the seat, Warden. The debate is over, whether the more like it or not. There will be no strike. We are going to do the hardest thing the Concorde has ever done. Which is? We are going to learn to lead a galaxy without being the most frightening thing in it. He paused at the chamber door, one claw on the frame. And we are going to be grateful, every single day, for the rest of our lives and our children's lives, that the human who came to our home volume came in a courier and not a cruiser. Because she could have. That is the whole of it, Warden. From this day forward, the entire Concorde exists, because she could have, and chose not to. He went in to face the seat. Seth of War stayed a moment longer at the window, looking out at the dark that had hidden a 19-kilometer warship behind a dead moon, and a 400-meter courier past every defense ring the Concorde had ever raised. The dark the Concorde had never thought to count. Somewhere out past the walls that had never been walls, 900 patrol cruisers waited, and behind them, a line fleet built without mercy, and behind that, a thing called the Far Watch whose size no one in the Concorde would ever know. She found that she was glad not to know it. The not knowing, Iris Vale had said, was the only thing keeping her species alive. Seth of War intended, with every year she had left, to keep it that way. The Moor did not wait for the seat's decision, because the Moor had already made their own, in secret, in the months while the Concorde debated. Seth of War learned it from a panicked relay 4 months after the courier left the home volume, 4 months in which the Concorde had begun, painfully, and against the grain of everything it had ever been, to imagine a future that was not built on numbers. The relay came from the human edge. From a Concorde listening post the Moor had not thought to silence, because they had not thought anyone loyal to the new policy would still be watching. And it carried a single message repeated on a loop, until the post's reactor failed. The Moor ascendancy, 200,000 ships, was 3 days out from the human world, the records called Tessin Reach. And it was not slowing down, and it was broadcasting demands ahead of itself. She took it to High Warden Esh, and Esh took it to the seat, and the seat erupted. 200,000, the Kel representative said, and there was something close to wonder in it, and something close to fear. The Moor gathered 200,000 ships and told no one, Under our own watch, while we sat here and learned humility, they built a wall. They told no one, because they knew we would forbid it, Esh said. His voice was very controlled, which Sethivor had learned to recognize as the sound of the High Warden being more afraid than he would ever show. They have decided that the Concord's new caution is cowardice. They have decided that the human who flew a courier through our homeworld was bluffing, that the Far Watch is a story we frightened ourselves with. They are going to test whether it is real. They are going to test it with 200,000 crews who do not know they are the test. And if it is not real? The Moor's empty seat seemed to ask. Though the Moor representative had departed 3 days before, recalled to the ascendancy without a word of farewell. If the humans bluffed, and the Moors break them where we dared not try, then the Moor will have done what we could not, and humbled the humans, and we will all owe them a debt we will be paying for 1,000 years. Esh looked around the chamber, slowly, taking in each of the 406. But you watched Kellis. Every one of you watched it 11 times over. You watched one patrol cruiser unmake 40,000 of our ships without taking a scratch, on 4% of its power, by its own honest accounting. Look me in the eyes, any of you, and tell me you believe that was the bluff, and the courier was the truth. Tell me you believe humanity's strength runs out somewhere, just past one ship. No one told him that. The chamber that had argued for war 4 months before could not now find a single voice for it. Then we must warn them, Sethivor said. Not the Moor, the humans. We must tell humanity that the Moor act alone, that the seat forbade this, that 200,000 ships do not speak for 406 species, that the Concord has changed, even if the Moor have not. You wish to warn the humans about an attack by our own Concord, the Kell said, and could not quite believe the words as they left. I wish to keep the Far Watch from arriving at our worlds, because the humans could not tell the difference between the Moor and the rest of us, Sethivor said. Commander Vale told us plainly, twice. The next time we point guns at them, they meet the fleet at our worlds, not theirs. If the Moor bring 200,000 ships to Tessin Reach, and the humans answer, and the humans do not believe the Concord tried to stop it, they will not stop at the Moor. They will finish the misunderstanding for good, and there are 405 other species in this chamber who did not vote for the Moor's war, and who do not deserve to die for the pride of the 406th. The seat gave her the authority within the hour. It was the fastest decision the Concord had made in a century, and it was made out of pure terror rather than wisdom, and Sethivor did not care why it was made so long as it was made. She took the imperant crown, rebuilt now from the wreck of Kellis, its scars repaired but not forgotten, and she ran for Tessin Reach at the highest jump her hull could survive, redlining her reactors the whole way, and she carried the only weapon that could stop what was coming. The truth, and the desperate hope that the humans would believe it, came from the Concord, and not from the Moor. She arrived too late to stop the Moor, and exactly in time to watch what the humans had been holding back. Tessin Reach hung in the void below her, a blue and green world ringed by a thin scatter of orbital stations and habitats. No warships among them, no fleet, nothing that looked like a defense. And around it, the Moor ascendancy had drawn itself into the same shape the Concord had used at Kellis. A wall. 200,000 ships, the largest fleet ever to leave Moor space, arranged in a sphere of dominance around a single undefended world. They had spent 4 centuries resenting the Concord that conquered them, and now they meant to do the very thing the Concord no longer dared, and seize for themselves the title of the largest force in the sky by being the ones who finally broke the humans where everyone else had flinched. The Moor were broadcasting on every channel as Sethivor arrived, the same way Kassoon had broadcast above Kellis, and the echo of it turned her cold. She heard their ascendant, a voice swollen with the exact certainty she remembered from Overlord Kassoon in his last hour, ordering the human world to surrender, ordering it to kneel, promising that 200,000 ships would teach humanity the lesson the cowardly Concord had failed to teach, naming the Concord by name, mocking it for letting one ship pass. More ascendancy, Sethivor broadcast, cutting across them with every watt the imperant crown could throw. This is Warden Sethivor of the Concord. Stand down. The seat forbade this. You do not speak for us. Turn back before you teach the humans that the Concord cannot be trusted to police its own, because if you teach them that, they will police all of us, and they will not be gentle a third time." The Ascendant laughed at her. The laugh carried clear across the channel for 200,000 crews to hear. "The coward of Kellis. You let one ship destroy 40,000, and you call that wisdom. You knelt to a single hull, and you have spent 4 months teaching the Concord to keep kneeling. Watch, Warden. Watch what conviction does where your cowardice failed. Watch what happens when someone is not afraid." And then the humans answered, and HFY War understood that she had not, in fact, arrived in time at all. She had only arrived in time to see. The Farwatch did not jump into the system, it was already there. That was the part that broke the Moor. The same way the unfolding hull had broken the Concord at Kellis, except 100 times over, 1,000. The Moor's sensors had read the space around Tessin Reach as empty, but for the thin ring of stations, a soft and undefended target, a world that had foolishly left itself open. It was not empty. It had never been empty. The humans had been there the whole time, running cold the way the Lantern Hollow had run cold behind the dead moon, colder than the void, beyond any setting the Moor instruments knew to look for. And when the Moor Ascendant gave the order to fire on the world, the dark around Tessin Reach simply opened its lamps. HFY War's lens tried to count them, and could not. The Lantern Hollow had been one 19-kilometer hull. The Farwatch was 19-kilometer hulls beyond the count of her instruments, ranked in a vast sphere that enclosed the entire star system, every one of them gray and scarred and patient, and they had let the Moor fly 200,000 ships into the exact center of it, before they revealed that the center was a trap with no walls, no exit, and no dark left to hide in, because the dark itself was the trap and always had been. The Moor Ascendant stopped laughing. "Concord vessel," a human voice said, and it was not Iris Vale. It was deeper, older, with the unhurried weight of something that had watched a great many fleets make the same mistake, and it spoke to HFY War alone, on the Imperant Crown's private band. "This is the Farwatch flagship Long Memory. We know you. Commander Vale's report named you the Warden who let one ship pass, the Warden who flew across a galaxy to warn us about her own Concord. You are the reason the Concord still exists, and you are the reason we are speaking to you, instead of including you in what is about to happen. We see you. Hold your station and do not fire, and you will carry this home as well." "The Moor act alone," HFY War said, the words tumbling out fast. "The seat forbade this. 405 species did not send them. The Concord has changed. I swear it on the wreck of Kellis. We have changed. Do not judge all of us by these 200,000. We know that," the voice said, and the knowing in it was total. "We have been listening at your edge for a very long time, Warden. Longer than the Concord has had a name for us. We know exactly who sent these 200,000 ships, and we know exactly who did not, down to the individual world and the individual vote in your chamber. This is why your homeworld is not currently inside this sphere, and why the Imperant Crown is not currently a line of holes in the dark. We are precise. We do not finish misunderstandings against the wrong people. Watch how precise. This is the lesson the Moor refused to learn from Kellis, and it is the only lesson we have left to teach, so we are going to teach it once, completely, and never again." The Farwatch fired, and it was nothing like Kellis. At Kellis, the Lantern Hollow had moved through the Concord like a worker clearing a field, slow, methodical, letting the lesson land beat by beat so that the survivors would understand each stage of it. The Farwatch did not need to teach a lesson in stages. The lesson had already been taught at Kellis, in full, recorded 11 times, carried home, debated in the seat, and the Moor had heard all of it and refused it, and so the Farwatch simply ended the question they had insisted on asking. The sphere of 19-kilometer hulls fired inward all at once, every ship at the same instant, and the firing lasted 4 seconds. And at the end of the 4 seconds, the Moor Ascendancy, 200,000 ships, the largest fleet ever to leave Moor space, was a slowly expanding shell of cooling metal, drifting outward toward the human world it had come to make kneel. Tessin Reach had not been touched. Not a single one of its orbital stations had so much as flickered. The thin, undefended ring of habitats hung in space exactly as it had before, lit and whole and calm, while the 200,000 ships that had come to destroy it drifted past in pieces. The humans had unmade the largest fleet in Moor history in 4 seconds and left the blue and green world below entirely whole, because the world had never been in danger, had never needed defending in the way the Moor imagined, because the defense had been the whole system, the whole dark, the patient sphere that the Moor had flown into believing it was empty. The precision was more terrifying than any amount of collateral ruin could have been. Ruin says, we are powerful and careless. This said, we choose. Every life that ends because we chose it to end. Every life that continues because we allowed it. The Far Watch had drawn a line precisely around the thing that threatened them, and erased exactly that and nothing else. Not one habitat, not one Concord observer, not 1 square meter of the world the Moor came to break. The Moor Ascendant's voice came once more across the channels, no longer swollen, stripped down to a single small frightened thing that did not understand what had happened to its certainty. We surrender. We surrender. The Ascendancy surrenders. Cease fire. We surrender. We yield. We will give anything, only stop. There is no ascendancy, the long memory said, not cruelly, just stating the sum the way Vale had stated the 4%. There is no one left to accept a surrender from. You spent it all on a wall, in 4 seconds, and the wall is behind you now, drifting outward. We are not refusing your surrender, Ascendant. There is simply no longer a thing that could surrender. You were the last of it, and you are speaking to me from the last intact bridge in your fleet, and I am letting you finish your sentence only so that you will understand, before the end, that you were warned, and you were shown, and you chose this, exactly as your Concord chose Kellis. HFY War sat at the center of the Far Watch's sphere, in the one Concord ship that had been allowed to live, and she made herself watch every second of it, because someone had to, and because the humans had chosen her, twice now, to be the one who carried it home. When the 4 seconds were over, and the shell of wreckage was drifting wide, and the last Moor bridge had gone silent, she opened her record, the same record she had kept at Kellis, and she spoke into it, with a steadiness she did not feel. This is Warden HFY War. 4 months after Kellis, the Moor Ascendancy defied the seat, and brought 200,000 ships to the human world of Tessin Reach, to do what the Concord no longer dared. The humans were already there. They had been there the whole time, running colder than the void, beyond our instruments. They destroyed the entire Moor fleet in 4 seconds, and did not harm the world the Moor came to threaten, nor a single station of it, nor the Concord vessel sent to stop the Moor. I record this, so the Concord understands the final shape of the thing we are dealing with. It is not that the humans are strong. We knew that at Kellis. It is that the humans are precise. They do not break what they do not choose to break. Every one of us is alive on their sufferance, and they keep the account exactly, by world and by vote, and they have decided, for reasons that are theirs alone, and that have to do with mercy and not with weakness, that the Concord may continue, and the Moor Ascendancy may not. She paused, and added the part that mattered most, the part Esh would need to hear, the part the proud ones in the chamber would need to be unable to deny. The Far Watch is real. I have seen it with my own eyes, at the center of it, surrounded on every side. I will not give a count, because there is no count that would help us, and a true count would only make us despair and do something foolish. I will say this. At Kellis, the humans sent 1 cruiser and called it a patrol. At Tessin Reach, they revealed a fleet that enclosed an entire star system and used 4 seconds of it and stood down. And the human voice that spoke to me told me, plainly, that the Far Watch is the answer they keep for a question no one has yet been foolish enough to ask in full. The Moor asked half of it, the half about whether the Far Watch was real. This was the answer to half. Let no one in the Concord ever ask the other half. The long memory's deep voice returned one final time as the Far Watch began to dim its lamps, hull after hull after hull going cold and dark and vanishing back into the empty-seeming space around Tessin Reach, until the sphere was gone, and the system looked, once more, like an undefended world ringed by helpless stations. Carry it home, Warden, it said. Tell your seat the Moor have answered the census in full, and the human edge is exactly as undefended as it was the day Commander Vale flew a courier through your homeworld, which is to say, not undefended at all, which is to say it never was. Nothing has changed except the number of those who understand. 200,000 fewer who misunderstood us. 1 warden more who carries the truth. Go home, HFY War. You will not be stopped. You never were. And the lamps went out, all of them, across the whole sphere, between one instant and the next, and the space around the blue and green world was empty again, or seemed to be, and the imperant crown sat alone above Tessin Reach, with the wreckage of 200,000 ships drifting past her hull, and HFY War turned her bow toward the Concorde and began the long way home, carrying the second truth, the larger one, the one she knew the seat would not want to hear, and would have no choice at all but to believe. The humans had not won at Kellis because they were strong. They had won everywhere, always, in advance, before any fleet ever launched, because they were already inside every wall the Concorde had ever built, counting, and patient, and choosing each day, world by world, and vote by vote, exactly who got to keep existing. The Concorde did not fall apart when HFY War brought home the second truth. It did something stranger, and harder, and slower. It changed. She delivered the record of Tessin Reach to the seat herself, standing again at the center of the chamber, built to make everyone feel small. And this time, there was no argument, because there was no faction left brave enough or foolish enough to make one. The more had been the loudest voice for war, and the more were now a drifting shell of metal above a human world that had not even lost power. And every species in the chamber had watched the recording, and every species had done the same arithmetic HFY War had done above Kellis, and again above Tessin Reach, and every species had arrived at the same answer. The answer was, we are alive because they choose it. High Warden Esh stood before the seat and said it plainly, the way he had taken to saying everything plainly since the courier crossed the home volume. We spent 11,000 years, he said, believing that the largest force decides who exists. We were not wrong about the principle. We were only wrong about the size of the largest force, and about which species held it. It was never us. It was always the humans, waiting at our edge, counting, choosing not to act. They let us believe we were the largest, because our belief cost them nothing, and our error cost them nothing, until an overlord, and then an ascendant, made the error cost something, and then they corrected us, twice, with exactly as much force as the correction required, and not one ship more. 40,000 for the overlord, who needed to be shown, 200,000 for the ascendant, who refused to be shown, both fleets gathered by our own pride, neither necessary, both spent. What do we do? The Kell asked, and there was no resentment in it now, only the bare question, with a galaxy where someone else decides who exists. The same thing 406 species did under us, Esh said. We learned to live inside it. The difference, the great and saving difference, is that the humans, unlike the Concorde, do not appear to want anything from us at all. They do not want our worlds. They do not want our surrender, our tribute, our fleets, our kneeling. Commander Vale told the Warden what they want, and I have thought about it every day since the courier left this volume. They want us to stop making everyone feel small. That is the whole of the human demand. It is the gentlest demand a superior power has ever made of an inferior one, and we are calling it conquest only because we cannot yet imagine power that does not take. We will have to learn to imagine it. They are going to make us. The seat was quiet for a long time. Then it began, slowly, unwillingly, against the grain of every instinct it had, to do the work. It took years. HFY War watched it happen from the bridge of the imperant crown, which the seat had made the flagship of a new thing, a thing the Concorde had never had in 11,000 years, a fleet whose purpose was not to make species kneel, but to keep any single species, the Moor's heirs included, from ever again gathering a wall of ships to test the human edge. The Concorde became, by slow and unwilling degrees, the thing Iris Vale had said it could become. Not a wall, a guard against walls. And the smaller species, the 400 who had spent 11,000 years being told that resistance was madness, discovered for the first time that the Concorde's strength was now pointed at the prevention of madness rather than its enforcement, and they did not entirely trust it, and they were right not to, because trust takes longer than fear, but it was a beginning, and beginnings had been impossible before. The humans did not come back, not for years. The human edge stayed silent, and the silence was its own kind of presence, because everyone in the Concorde now knew that the silence was not absence. It was attention. The Far Watch was out there, cold and dark and uncounted, and it was watching. and the watching kept the peace more completely than 11,000 years of Concord numbers ever had. There is a discipline that fear teaches, and a discipline that understanding teaches, and the Concord, having been given both at terrible cost, slowly traded the first for the second. HFY War was an old Veth by the time the humans returned, her 3 eyes dimmed, her claws stiff, the 60 years she had served the old Concord now joined by the long, quiet decades she had served the new one. And when the humans returned, it was the Lantern Hollow that came. She knew the hull the moment her sensors found it. 19 kilometers of gray metal scarred with old burns no one had painted over, running its cold blue lamps as it crossed into Concord space on a straight line, exactly as it had decades before above the dead moon of Kellis. This time no fleet rose to surround it. This time no overlord shouted threats across open channels. This time the Concord did the thing it had learned at the cost of 40,000 ships and 200,000 more, and 11,000 years of certainty. It let one ship pass. The Lantern Hollow came to the home volume, past the rings that everyone now understood had never been walls, and it requested Warden HFY War by name. And she went, slowly, to the window of the receiving deck, where she had once watched a weaponless courier teach the Concord that it had no defenses at all, and she opened the channel herself, with a claw that did not move as quickly as it once had. Lantern Hollow. Warden HFY War. The same tired voice. The decades had not rested it. If anything, the tiredness had settled deeper, the tiredness of a thing that had done a hard duty for a very long time, and was nearing the end of it. You are still here. I am glad. I was not certain you would be. Your kind does not live as long as the work sometimes takes, and the work took longer than I hoped. I am here, HFY War said. The Concord is here. We did what you asked, Commander Vale. We stopped counting. We stopped making everyone feel small. We turned our fleet into a guard against the next overlord, the next ascendant. It is not perfect. We are not a gentle people. We never were. But it is done, and it holds, and it has held for longer now than I once thought we would survive. I know, Iris Vale said. We have been watching. That is why I came in the Lantern Hollow and not the courier. The courier was for when I needed you to be afraid. The cruiser is for when I want you to understand that I am not afraid of you anymore. I came openly, in the ship that broke your fleet, because I trust you not to point guns at it, and that trust, Warden, that single fact, is the whole reason I came. I wanted you to see, before the end of your life, that we noticed, that the work was not wasted, that the species we hoped for turned out to be real. HFY War found that her throat sacs had tightened, and she did not entirely understand why, except that she was old, and the thing in the window was the thing that had defined the whole second half of her long life. Why does it matter that you noticed? She asked. Because the Far Watch was built for one purpose, Warden, and the purpose was never conquest. I told your High Warden, it was the answer to a question no one had been foolish enough to ask. I did not tell him the question. The question was, will the galaxy ever let us simply exist? We built the Far Watch because we looked out at a galaxy that had unified 406 species under the threat of numbers, and we understood exactly what that galaxy would do to us the moment it noticed we existed. We built it to survive being noticed, and then we waited, for a very long time, in the dark at the edge of your shadow, hoping we would never have to use it, hoping that somewhere among the 406 there was a species that could be taught a different way to be large. A species that could be set free instead of crushed. And we were that species, HFY War said. You almost were not, Iris Vale said, and for the first time in all their years of speaking, there was something close to confession in it. I want you to know how close it ran. When the Overlord told me to cease to exist, there was a voice on the Lantern Hollow, an old voice, older than mine, that said the Concord had earned the Far Watch, and we should give it to them whole, and be done with the threat forever. We had 406 reasons to believe no species that built a chamber to make everyone feel small could ever be anything but what it was. The only thing that stayed our hand was you, Warden. One officer, on one bridge, choosing in the worst hour to power down her guns. We watched you make that choice, and we decided the Concord was worth one more chance, and we spent 40,000 ships and 4 months of patience, and then 200,000 more, buying that chance, all on the strength of a single Veth who let one ship pass. I have never told you that the whole of your species rode on you alone. It did. You did not fail it. At Kellis, you let one ship pass after it cost you 40,000, Iris Vale said. In your home volume, your High Warden bowed his head to a courier, rather than ask the question that would have ended you. At Tessin Reach, you flew across the galaxy, redlining your reactors, to warn us about your own Concorde's attack. You were the species we were hoping for, Warden. We just had to break a great deal first to find out. Because there was no other way to find out. No species that believes it is the largest thing in the sky has ever changed because it was asked. It changes because something larger arrives, and it has no choice but to change or end. We gave you the smallest larger thing we had, one cruiser. We held the rest back specifically so that the lesson would be survivable. Every ship we revealed only after you refused the gentler version. The Overlord refused to let one ship pass, so we showed him the cruiser. The Moor refused to believe the cruiser, so we showed them the Farwatch. At every step, the size of what we revealed was decided by the size of your refusal. We were never the ones escalating, Warden. We were only ever answering. Exactly. No more. You could have simply asked, Sethivor said. The old argument, the one she had carried for decades. Long ago, you could have flown a courier to the seat first, before Kellis, and asked us to change, and spared 40,000 ships, and 200,000 more. No, Iris Vale said, and the tiredness in her voice was bottomless now, the tiredness of someone who had wished the same thing 1,000 times, and known 1,000 times why it was impossible. We could not. You would not have heard it. You would have scanned the courier, found it weaponless, and dismissed it, and gone on building walls. And one day, you would have noticed the human edge and decided to add it to your census. And then we would have had to use the Farwatch all at once, against a Concorde that had never been given the chance to learn. The 40,000 and the 200,000 were not the price of our cruelty, Warden. They were the price of your pride, and your pride would not come down for anything smaller. We gave you the cheapest lesson your pride would accept. It was not cheap, pride never is, but it was the cheapest there was. Sethivor stood at the window and looked at the gray hull that had taught a galaxy of 406 species the correction to 11,000 years of certainty, and she understood the last piece of it, the piece she had carried home twice without fully grasping, the piece that had taken the rest of her life to arrive. The humans had never wanted to be the largest force in the sky. They had been forced into it by a galaxy that respected nothing else, that had taught 406 species that only numbers were real, and they had used that terrible position as gently as such a thing could ever be used, revealing only as much as each refusal demanded, holding the rest back, not out of mercy alone, but out of hope. Hope that one of the 406 would prove able to learn the lesson before the whole of the Farwatch had to be shown. Hope that they could find a species to set free, rather than another to crush, so that they could finally believe the galaxy was a place where they were allowed to exist. The Concorde had been that species. It had cost 40,000 ships and 200,000 more in her entire long life, and the death of every certainty the Concorde had ever held. But it had learned the lesson, and it was, Sethivor understood now, the only conquered species in the entire history of the galaxy that the humans had ever set free by conquering, the only one they had broken in order to save. What happens now? She asked. Now I leave, Iris Vale said, and the Lantern Hollow does not come back, and the courier does not come back, and the Farwatch goes back to being a silence at your edge. You will never see us again, Warden. You or your children or your children's children, unless a new overlord rises somewhere among your 406 and points a wall of guns at one ship that asked to pass. If that day ever comes, you will know what to do, because you taught the whole Concorde how, with one choice, in the worst hour of its history. You will let the ship pass, and we will stay silent, and the peace you built will hold, and that is the only victory either of us ever needed or ever wanted. And if no such day comes, then we were right about you, Iris Vale said, and you will never hear from us again, and 10,000 years from now, your descendants will tell a story about the time a single gray ship hung above a dead moon, and a frightened warden made the wisest choice in the history of the Concorde. And they will not entirely believe it, because by then, it will seem impossible that the Concorde was ever the kind of thing that needed teaching, that it was ever a wall instead of a guard against walls. That is the future I want for you, Warden. The one where we are a legend you half doubt, a story to frighten children who can no longer imagine the world that made it true. Go and build that future. You are most of the way there already. The channel began to close, and then held, one moment longer, and the tired voice came back softer than Seth of War had ever heard it, almost gentle, almost free. Seth of War, Iris Vale said, thank you for letting one ship pass. And the channel closed, and the lantern hollow turned, 19 kilometers of scarred gray metal coming about in the home volume of the Concorde, with no fleet daring or needing to stop it, and it ran its cold blue lamps along its flank one last time, the same cold blue light that had hung above the dead moon of Kellis when Seth of War was young, and the Concorde was proud, and the Count would not stop climbing, and it began its long straight way out of Concorde space, exactly as it had come, the way it had first come decades before, the way it had always come, without hiding and without hurry. Seth of War watched it go until her old sensors lost it, which took a long time, because it did not hide, and it did not hurry. It simply left, the way something leaves when it has nothing left to prove and never did, when the whole long demonstration is finally complete, and the audience has at last understood. She was the last living Veth who had stood at a window and watched the Count of a human hull refuse to stop climbing above a dead moon. She had carried that Count home, and the second truth after it from above Tessin Reach, and now, at the end of her life, she carried the last truth, the one Iris Vale had given her at the window, the one that was not about ships at all. The largest force in the sky had never wanted to be large. It had wanted, the whole time, through 11,000 years of silence in the dark, and the long decades of correction after, only one thing. It had wanted to find a species that could be taught to stop making everyone feel small, so that it could finally put the Farwatch back to sleep, and stop being the most frightening thing in the galaxy, so that it could stop being afraid. The Concorde had given it that. Not because the Concorde was wise. It had not been wise. It had been the most arrogant power in the history of the sky, and it had brought 40,000 ships to humble one cruiser, and it had deserved every consequence of that arrogance. But somewhere inside the arrogance, there had been a warden who, with 40,000 guns at her command and an overlord screaming in her ear, had chosen to let one ship pass. And that single choice, made in the worst hour of the Concorde's history, had been enough to convince the largest force in the sky that the Concorde was worth setting free instead of ending. Seth of War turned from the empty window, old and tired and unspeakably grateful, and she went, slowly, to give the seat the last record she would ever carry. It was the shortest of the three. It said, only that the humans had come a final time, openly, in the ship that broke the fleet, and had thanked the Concorde for becoming the thing it should have been all along, and had gone, and would not return. And at the end of the record, after the official words, she added one line of her own, the line she wanted carried down through the 10,000 years, until the Concorde's descendants half doubted it, the line that was the whole of what she had learned at a window above a dead moon, and never stopped learning for the rest of her life. The largest force in the galaxy, she said, was never the one with the most ships. It was the one patient enough to count the dark, and gentle enough to leave a door for the species willing to walk through it, and they walked through ours, and shut it softly behind them, and let one ship pass.